Hi, everybody. This is Catherine Crace. I am a SWEAP team member coming to you from LIU Brooklyn in Brooklyn, New York. And today we're going to be showing you how to read and interpret reports for the Foundation Curriculum Assessment Instrument, otherwise known as the FCAI. So I'm going to sign in here, and the account that I'm going to look at is model sweepster, and let me put in my password. Not saving it today. So this is what it looks like when you log into the SWEAP account. Your information, you can change your picture, you can give a description of yourself, but this is just a generic account, model sweepster. And today we're going to be focusing on reading and interpreting Foundation Curriculum Assessment Instrument reports. I want to remind people that this is not a video about how to make a report. There are other videos that can help you with that process, including how to send paper forms to submit a report and how to make a report from finished electronic assessments. Today, we are going to be focusing on reading and interpreting existing reports, meaning that I've already sent in some instruments for administration to make a report, and so that's what we're going to be focusing on. Today, we're looking right here at an exit report on the Foundation Curriculum Instrument that I submitted in April of 2017. I'm going to click on that. While it's loading, I just want to remind everybody that every time you click on a link for a report, you are asking SWEAP's computer to process your data again. Now, why would we want to do that? Why can't you just have the same report every time you open it up? Well, your student data is not changing, right? We're only going to be looking at your students' data that you submit for reporting. But every time you ask for a report, you're being compared to the national average. And the national data sits in a database here in the SWEAP computer, and that number changes. So back in April of 2017, when I first ran this report, we had probably 100 or so fewer FCAIs completed at exit. So my students were being compared to a smaller pool of national comparison. And now here, when I'm actually doing this video, it is September 1st, 2017. And so this national N is actually higher now. Now, why is that a benefit? Well, it's a benefit because it's a larger sample. And so it's a better comparison as to what the reality of the population may be. So just want to highlight at the top of the report's online page that there are options to download the file as a PDF or to download the file as a Word document. You can choose to download either or both. There's no extra charge. Those are available to you. The benefit of downloading as a Word document is that you can play with the formatting if you want to provide only part of the file as necessary for reporting outcomes assessments internally within your program or department, within your school or college or university, or to regional accreditors, or for CSWE reporting purposes. So you can use those tools, but we're just going to be looking at the online report for today, and just want to highlight some language which exists now. FCAI reports no longer include suggested EPAS 2008 practice behaviors. Programs may choose to assign relevant practice behaviors at their own discretion. Now that's, of course, if your program is still being accredited, reaccredited under EPAS 2008. But today we're looking at a report that is based on EPAS 2015, and that you'll see right here. Okay, so section 1 of the FCAI report looks at cumulative scores of all students. So I'm looking at my program. I had 15 graduating seniors last year in my undergraduate program. They all took the FCAI at exit, meaning one of the last classes before they graduated. And on average, they got 49% of questions right. Their scores ranged from about 7% right to 73% right, with a standard deviation of 15.57. When compared to the national average of a population of 2001 students at exit of the foundation year, we're looking at a national average of 61% correct. So my students are not performing as well as the national average. This range in scores, the national average range from 0%, which is a student that probably didn't complete their assessment, which isn't helpful, to 90%. The standard dev of 14.26. Now we do the t-test for you based on the national comparison. And you'll see here that there's a statistically significant difference between my student scores and the national average. I want to remind people, it is a reality that a significant, nearly half of all programs will have a national score, a program's average lower than the national average. It is a statistical reality that that will happen. Am I happy about being under the national average? No, but it is not something that I dwell on, because if everybody was above the national average, we'd be lying. Right? So we want to be close to the national average, and we're actually getting close. So it's not so bad. What's most important for programs, regardless of what your comparison is to the national, is whether your students are meeting or exceeding competency. Now here, I find that 8 of my 15 students met or exceed competency when looking at all questions on this multiple choice exam. Well, what does meet or exceeding competency mean? Well, it means that 8 of my 15 students answered 50% or more of the total number of questions correct. Why does SWEAP set our competency benchmark at 50%? Seems kind of low. If I was giving a test in my class, I would hope that students would get at least 65% or 70 or 75% of the questions correct. Well, it's important to realize that when SWEAP is developing our FCAI, we are actually looking for an item difficulty index relating to about 50 to 55% questions correct. So we believe that a student who is answering approximately 50% of the questions correct overall, or as we'll look in section 2 under each competency, that we believe that to be competent. That's kind of our goal. So I am not particularly pleased that only 53% of my seniors got 50% or more of the questions correct, but that is what that number shows right there. So now we're looking at program section scores compared to the national average. And so in section 2, we're looking at questions, the answers to questions as divided by competencies. Competency 1 through 9 are outlined in this first part of the table. The second column shows the percentage of questions your students got correct on average. And you'll see this varies. So I had as few as 30% of questions correct in competency 9, but 70% correct in competency 8. And you have your standard devs, and then you have your mean national section score. So on average, you'll see, right, that we looked at all students who took the FCAI in the exit, 63% of them, or 63% of questions were answered correctly in competency 1, 50% in policy, right, 73% when it comes to intervention. And so the t-test and p-values relate to the comparison of my students' performance compared to the national performance. So even though my students are answering fewer questions correct on average than the national data set, national students, we're really only statistically significantly lower in 4 areas. So if I really wanted to focus on areas in which my students were performing lower than the national average, these are the 4 competencies that I would focus, which it's important to note are actually the ones that we have highlighted through our previous self-study, and we are working to improve our curriculum as we speak to address these deficiencies. So competency 2, competency 4, competency 5, and competency 9. So diversity and difference, research, practice, and evaluation. So again, I could dwell on my comparisons to the national average, or I can more appropriately report on benchmarking. And so again, SWEAP determines as a default that competency is students getting at least 50% of questions correct. So it's not so much that we care that students on average answered almost 60% of questions correct here in competency one, but CSWE wants us to report, and we should care, that 11 out of 15 of students achieved or met or exceeded competency in questions related to competency one. So 73% of students who took the FCAI at exit last April were competent. They answered 50% or more of questions correct. Now that's something that I would be more proud of reporting than being under the national average. And so it's helpful to compare here the percentage of students achieving competency. And so most concerning to me would be this number right here, that only 13% of students were achieving, meeting or exceeding competency when it came to engaging in policy practice. So we need to look at our policy classes. And similarly, I'd have concerns with numbers in the 30s. So again, that's research and evaluation. So this part of the report, section 2, is going to be most helpful in your reporting for self-study purposes and for your online outcomes assessments reporting. I just want to highlight and remind everybody that the FCAI is a knowledge measure. So it is a direct measure of student knowledge and should be used to inform assessment of the knowledge dimension of each of the social work competencies. Now, if you want to get really specific, at least for the purposes of evaluating your curriculum, not necessarily reporting to CSWE or other accrediting bodies, we provide you with item by item information. So we give you each of the questions on the FCAI, and we tell you how many of your students got that question correct. We don't tell you the correct answer. We are not showing you the options for correct answers. We do not want programs to teach the test. But we are we give you this information because there may be instances where answers may be such that you are very concerned. So right here in competency 1, you see that none of my students were able to differentiate privileged communication and confidentiality. And so it might be something that I want to look into my curriculum and talk with my faculty who are teaching these relevant courses to discuss and address. But again, we don't want to teach the test, but we want to make sure that students are receiving the information we believe appropriate to professional practice. So you could scroll through and see other areas in which not many students answered a particular question correctly, and try to determine why or where there were gaps in your curriculum, perhaps, or maybe you're inclined to not be concerned with that particular question. It's up to the program itself. Okay, so just a reminder, a lot of this terminology at the bottom of the report is just related to our programming. It reminds us what we've done and when to improve our reports. These reports have been updated even since they were first developed in response to EPAS 2015, and most notably, we worked on providing users with the necessary reporting on benchmarking. So last thing on benchmarking, if you are a program in which you believe that your benchmark should be higher than 50% of questions correct, you can make a request for a report with a customized benchmark. Each report request for a customized benchmark is a $10 charge. You can order that through our website on the instruments page. And simply what happens is we apply a different benchmark to your particular program's report. Your t-test and p-values, that's not going to change because we're not changing your comparison to the national average. But these final columns here will change based on the percentage of questions that you would like your students to get correct. When you get that report, it will highlight and change the number here. But just a reminder, there's no reason to change that default if you don't want to. I hope this was helpful. Going to look at one other thing. We're going back to my profile, and I want to just highlight that there are reports available to you under EPAS 2015 assessment, even if the the instruments were completed prior to EPAS 2015. So, for instance, my students have been taking the FCAI for many years, and so I could look at an exit report from, let's say, from April 2015, for instance. In April 2015, EPAS was not yet finalized, wasn't finalized until June, and so we updated our FCAI instrument after that. So this is looking at version 9 of the FCAI, and you'll see that there because it's originally under the EPAS 2008 foundation curriculum. But the reports are updated. They should have been. Okay, here we go. So the reports are updated to include information that's helpful for reporting under EPAS 2008, but also providing you analysis that's helpful for EPAS 2015. So if we go back, you'll see here that I had 20 graduating seniors back in 2015. And when compared to the national average, again, we were statistically significantly different in our scores, only having an average of 50% correct. But again, we have benchmarking data here. Just got a text on my computer. So we have benchmarking data here, which is responsive to EPAS 2015 expectations. And while we do provide reporting on EPAS 2008 competencies here, we actually divide them by curricular areas, the 7 original curricular areas of practice, HIPSI, policy, research, ethics, diversity, and social and economic justice. But if I am currently in a evaluation program assessment related to EPAS 2015, I can also get my reports related there. And what you'll see here is pretty much the same chart that we saw in the previous report, right, related to each of the 9 competencies and the comparisons, t-test values, p-values, and benchmarks. And again, an item by item evaluation here. Okay, so just a reminder, the only reason why I'm showing you this is to let programs know that if you have been collecting data over a bunch of years and you would like to compare your students' achievement or pool your achievement of your students into one report, you can do that and get numbers that are relevant to EPAS 2015 if that is the document under which you are going up for reaccreditation. So we're back at the home page, and I hope you learned something today. Thanks.